everyone. Thanks for joining us. Our guests today are two pianists who perform as a duo. They performed internationally, they have several recordings, and they also produce the Macrocosmos Festival every year. Please give a big welcome to Saar Ahuvia and Stephanie Ho. Saar and Stephanie,
Hi.
Welcome to the program.
Hey, Andrew. How's it going?
Great. It's really good to have you here. So we've invited you here to talk about the first track on your upcoming album. And it's a really interesting piece because it's a transcription of a string quartet, but you guys are actually playing it as a piano duo, piano four hands. So I'm really excited to hear it. I'm really excited to talk about it. And I was wondering if we could just start off by just maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you chose this piece, in particular, you know, as the first piece on your upcoming album, because you know the first piece is a really significant one, you know, and it's a really important one. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you chose it for this.
Actually, you mentioned such an important point because we actually debated whether or not to start the CD with the first movement of Quartet Opus 130 or the other selection on the album, which would be the Schubert F minor Fantasy. And this debate actually has been going on since the last 3 months, since the entire period of the New York City pandemic, let's just put it that way. And if I can just be frank, we originally wanted to start the CD with the Schubert Fantasy and end with Opus 130 because Opus 130 is such a victorious, spirited, powerful, exuberant work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of Beethoven, it's probably, it's up there with Ninth Symphony, it's up there with Hammerklavier, it's up there with his greatest joyful works that he ever wrote. And in the end, and this is a very recent decision, we decided to switch the order of the album and to have 130 begin the album because we actually wanted to end the CD on a much more somber note because of what's happening in our world right now. So this recording that you'll see later of us performing the first movement of Opus 130 is kind of the start of this extremely exuberant journey that Saar and I had for the vision of this album. And as we proceed, it's going to turn actually into a much more somber note.
Yeah, and actually biographically, just a little aside, Beethoven completed this quartet in transcription in 1827 and then died the year after. And Schubert wrote the fantasy the next year, 1828, and then also died, much younger than Beethoven. So chronologically, literally one piece comes right after the other. So we're keeping that, you know, besides the somber element that Stephanie mentioned.
Yeah, and I think those are both really powerful motives, I think, you know, for deciding on, you know, the arc, you know, of an album, you know, and the arc of, you know, the playing and that kind of thing. And I think you're right, because that's one of the most I think powerful things, you know, that we can do as musicians, you know, is really, you know, reflect what's going on in the world, you know, and, you know, add commentary to it, you know, in a musical fashion or in an artistic fashion, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every second of this CD is thought through, planned, and is very pensive. And we've been having this ongoing conversation for really months now. About how to present this album in a time of crisis. And at the very end, we decided that our original idea of ending the album on the most explosively joyful, exuberant note wasn't going to be appropriate for the release. And that this process, this artistic process, has to mirror the life process, which is that we are really in a time of struggle.
Yeah. You know, we were really, in many ways, joining the bandwagon of the Beethoven 250th birthday year. And, you know, this incredible quartet with the Grosse Fuge at the end was going to be the victorious ending of this album.
Mhm.
And yet, you know, Beethoven's birthday has pretty much been sacked by the
this
pandemic,
whole 250th
Yeah.
birthday of Beethoven has been really haunting us
Mhm.
for the past 3 months too, because you know, just a few months ago we were seeing friends in the music industry. Obviously all our friends are in the music industry, and
Yeah.
people were actually predicting that we were going to get so sick of Beethoven, that there was going to be so much Beethoven, that we were going to have an overdose of Beethoven and we're going to never want to hear Beethoven again. And those predictions really haunt us now, that the entire music industry has been completely silenced. We've had our voices choked off.
Yeah.
And those conversations I keep recycling those conversations in my mind and think, oh my gosh, did we just wish something upon the world that we never had intended in the first place? So not to put a damper on Opus 130, we just want this piece to be a celebration of life, but also know that you know, parts of this quartet is very somber, very pensive, and Beethoven is such a cohesive composer in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I think that's one of the reasons, I mean, we still listen to him today, you know, is that he just is so comprehensive in his emotions and the way he portrays, you know, emotions and the way he portrays the world, you know, honestly. And you know, I think you know, he was writing in a certain time, you know, before ours, you know, but there's a reason it's timeless, you know, and there's a reason that it's lasted, you know, because we're still affected by all these emotions, I think.
Absolutely. And in Opus 130, I mean, it's a huge, sprawling work, but he really covers everything, you know, emotionally. And in the end, the way he ties it all together in his, you know, it's like everything is going to be all right kind of message, you know, no matter what the adversity is that you're facing. And then Schubert is very different in the sense that he really lets the tragedy kind of go all the way and doesn't give you the hope in the end, which is really, you know, the shift from, I think, from the classical period to the romantic period. You really kind of see it in these two works.
What's more realistic, you know?
Sure.
There's no rebuttaling in Schubert. He lets it really just have a crash landing if you really want a crash landing. Whereas Beethoven is always going to uplift you somehow. Even in tragic works, he seems to hold that thought very dear to him. That we should not fall into total despair.
Right.
And you can hear that in the first movement of Opus 130. There's a lot of meandering. There's a lot of, where's the theme going? But in the end, he's always going to bring it back. And in the end, he's always going to show you where the theme is going to go until the end of the piece. Right. And that's what we love about Beethoven. This is why we keep coming back to him. Is that there is always an answer to everything.
Right. Well, and that's what I was going to mention as well, because even though it's ultimately a very triumphant sound, you know, it does start off, you know, very, very solemn, you know, and very, very quiet.
Definitely.
And very, and I think that's a very interesting contrast, you know, to this idea of, you know, being very triumphant and, you know, looking for hope, you know, but starting off as something that's very somber, I think.
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks in this music, and harmonically and the way he carries the themes. Often you're not quite sure where he's going, you know, and it really has this meandering quality, which actually connects to Schubert as well. You know, Schubert is known for kind of meandering a lot, and Beethoven is really looking for some new avenues in these late quartets. You know, he's really exploring. And it's almost like he doesn't, you get a sense that he almost doesn't care where it takes them. He's just going with it. You know, he doesn't really care if the listener is going to be boggled by so what are you doing? Where are you going with this?
Right.
Because he knows he'll get where he needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for us, it's been a really challenging piece because interpretation-wise, there's a lot more question marks,
Mm-hmm.
and also transferring the string writing to the piano can be technically really quite awful at times. It's very unidiomatic.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did what was your approach when you were dealing with things like that? Because, there's, some obvious instrument differences in the piano and the strings. What was your approach, as far as interpretation, in dealing with that kind of dichotomy?
Well, I think there's two different approaches, and we basically have to approach the piece with both.
Mm-hmm.
One approach is to try to sound like the string players as much as possible. Listen to Emerson, listen to Guarneri, listen to all the contemporary quartets, younger quartets, and see what they're doing, and see if we can imitate the sound. The other approach, which we also have to implement, is to have it sound completely the opposite, meaning that we're taking the music and we're putting it literally on the keyboard. Forget what it sounds like before. We use our best instincts, just like we're interpreting a new piece of music written by a composer today, let's just say. How does it sound good on the piano? How is a voice on the piano? How can we make it more powerful on the piano? What are the same kind of balance issues that we have in this piece that we have in any other piano work? So we're kind of constantly straddling those two ideas, and I think in the end, they're both implemented somewhat at the same time, if you will.
Right.
Because the reality is that it is a string quartet transcription, but we're doing it on the piano.
Right.
So maybe at times you'll hear us trying to imitate the strings, but for the most part, I think trying to make it sound as keyboard friendly and as keyboard identifiable as possible is really the key.
Yeah. Well, and is there a particular difference in doing it on piano four hands, like on one piano, as opposed to doing it on two different pianos?
100 million percent.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of the intimacy and the chamber feel. Two pianos is much more symphonic. It's much more kind of, you get a big picture, you get a big sound, you get, double damper pedals, kind of giving you that so much more overtones. Whereas the forehand really gives you a sense of closeness physically. You're right next to the person, but you can really breathe the music together.
Yeah.
You don't have to cue as much. You can literally watch the other person's fingers to follow.
Right.
And
for me, it's almost impossible to do these transcriptions on two pianos. Although I have seen a video of somebody doing the Grosse Fuge on two pianos. It just, the instruments are too large. You're just too far apart from the other pianist. For a piece that people are so used to having four people cohesively sit tight and blend the music together. So we're very reluctant to do the transcriptions on two pianos, actually.
Yeah, it would be way more comfortable.
Yeah, it would be. It would make our life easier.
We wouldn't be bumping into each other.
We'd be arguing a lot less.
We wouldn't be on each other's hands. We could pedal for ourselves. Which, there's so many arguments about pedaling issues. But you don't get the same kind of visceral feel,
Yeah.
And we actually feel the same, even doing something like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. Even though on two pianos it is so much easier. But when you're playing something like that next to another person, it's like you literally feel the piano is going to explode, and it kind of has, the right, feel.
Yeah. Well, let's take a listen. So this is Saar and Stephanie performing the string quartet, Opus 130, Adagio to Allegro. Well, Saar and Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been really fun to hear you play. Before we go, can you tell everybody where we can find out a little bit more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always check us out at Steph Saar Duo, all in one word.com. Also check out our Portland Festival, which is happening online this year. It's called Macrocosmos Project, and that's Macrocosmos Project in one word.org. If you have trouble spelling that, just go on our website and there's a link to Macrocosmos Project. And yeah, the album is coming out October with new Focus recordings. And it's going to be actually our first all digital release. We're going with the times. So no physical copies, just all digital, and it'll be available on, you know, all the Spotifys and Amazons and iTunes, whatever is digital out there that people are into right now.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, I'm really looking forward to it, and I can't wait to hear the entire album. I'm sure it's just going to be remarkable.
Thanks so much. Well, it's been a big labor of love for sure.
Oh, yes.
No, I can
Thank
tell.
you.
Yeah, I can tell, and I'm sure it's just going to be fantastic. And I look forward to that, and I look forward to many more, recordings from you guys.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Great
Thanks
to
so
talk to you.
much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming, and I'll see you later.
Awesome. Ciao.
Ciao.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to be able to talk to great musicians, and I hope you enjoy it too. So join us next time for more conversations and performances. And in the meantime, I hope you hear some great music. Take care, everyone.